Rob Tymec is a locally celebrated creative force in Windsor, Essex County, blending his talents as a writer, producer, and performer to bring stories to life in vivid detail. As a storyteller rooted in the region, Rob has crafted a rich and immersive body of work that spans written narratives, theatrical productions, and dynamic live experiences. He is perhaps best known for his locally and regionally acclaimed ghost tours, eerie atmosphere-filled walks that weave together history, folklore, and spine-tingling tales. From written page to live performance, Rob Tymec continues to enchant and engage audiences, preserving the spirit of Windsor, Essex history, and legends with every story he tells. Please put your hands together for our storyteller on Pelee Island, Rob Tymec.
Crowd, follow along the way. Begin with a single step, a journey into yesterday. There are spirits hanging heavy in the air. There are creatures lurking sinisterly in the night. We shall indulge them for a moment or two, and in so doing, give you all quite the fright. So let the journey begin. Open your eyes to the past. Listen to the unfolding of tales that after centuries still continue to last. Good evening. You may say good evening back. Good evening. As you can already see, you have picked a very good place to sit. You're going to be pretty safe back there, but not entirely safe. It's very safe here on the island. Not just because you're a closely knit community that looks out for each other, which is a beautiful thing, of course. But there is another thing that Pelee Island appears to be very safe from. The supernatural. For over a decade now, I have been collecting stories concerning the paranormal throughout Windsor and Essex County. I have literally heard hundreds upon hundreds of stories now concerning ghosts and spirits, or even just old legends. I have taken the best of them and turned them into a live performance art show like the one you're seeing tonight. But what I find most interesting to note is that during all of these pursuits, all of this endless amount of time of listening to stories from people who oftentimes really didn't have particularly spooky things happen to them, after all that time, I have yet to hear one Pelee Island story.
We've got time.
You seem to have avoided getting ghosts over here. I think they don't like taking the ferry. Might be that. I did do some just research online, and I have managed to find a story or two about the island, but it sounds like I might have an earful or two before I go, so please feel free to come forward and share your stories with me. I always like to add to the repertoire. So I will get to a few Pelee Island stories. But I'm going to start on the mainland. While we will stay here safely on the island, we will go through Windsor, Essex County, making various stops on the way, pointing out both public buildings and private homes that are said to be infested with spirits. Now, of course, this makes sense in a lot of ways. When you look at Windsor, Essex historically, this is one of the oldest settlements in the province, if not the country. Because of our strategic position along the Great Lakes, a very strong military and economic interest was developed in this region very early on. Well, the older a place is, the more people have died there. The more likely some of those spirits decide they don't want to cross over properly and want to stick around. But that's just talking about white settlers. Let's remember there was an entire civilization here before us with an even longer history. They too have had a spiritual impact on this region. There is, for instance, a wooded area in Colchester that before a single settler from Europe or anywhere else set foot, this wooded area was used by multiple tribes for intense spiritual rituals and ceremonies. Shamans often believed that for some reason the spirits spoke stronger in this area. Just, like I said, a small wooded spot just on the outskirts of Colchester. Any number of people over the years have claimed to see First Nations people dancing in some sort of ritual. Curious? I come a little closer, and the figures fade away. That's just a simpler, smaller story involving the very rich history of this region. We're going to go a little bit more in depth now. We're going to start in a nice southernmost part of the county, and move our way up into Windsor, and then come back down again into Amherstburg. We'll start in the thriving metropolis of Kingsville. In 1886, a tavern was built along the shoreline, not too far away from the docks we disembarked from earlier today to take the ferry over. The original name of this tavern was the Grovedale Inn. Now it has taken on various identities over the years, switched hands numerous times. Probably its most colorful period was the 1920s. It was a speakeasy run by the rum runners. They were smuggling booze out of the place all the time. Eventually it came to be known as the Navy Inn. If you're familiar with the Navy Yard Inn, rather, if you're familiar with it. Yes. Now, sadly, the Navy Yard is no longer in existence. It was torn down. But it had a very rich paranormal history before that tragic event occurred. They even had a name for the resident ghost there. They called him George, because it was believed to be the spirit of George Stills, who was hired by the rum runners in the 1920s to be the caretaker for the place. Now, eventually, there were some disagreements regarding George's pay, and George sort of shut himself in and refused to leave until he was given the proper fee that had been promised to him. And suddenly, George was just found dead in his bed one morning. That's kind of the way the rum runners operated back then. You didn't want to cross them too hard. But it is believed that it is George's spirit that lingered in the place long afterwards. George was mischievous. He loved turning on taps and then turning them off, or flicking light switches on and off. And you would literally see it happen before your eyes. Sometimes you'd just be standing in front of the sink, maybe ready to get some water, and you'd watch that tap turn all by itself right in front of you. And then a few seconds later, turn back and shut off. Same with the lights. Same with George's room. He had a specific room that he stayed in and was, of course, murdered in. And for quite a while, the upstairs section of the structure was residential. The downstairs would be a bar. And George did not like his room tampered with. George got very upset when one of the owners, back when it was still just the Grovedale, would wallpaper the room. He did not like that wallpaper. You would put some new wallpaper up, and within a matter of days, it was torn back down. On one occasion, they had just put the wallpaper up, gone downstairs to look after some business in the bar, and they could literally hear the wallpaper getting torn down. A certain bar manager, back in its final incarnation, had a lot of trouble with George, again with these lights. They wanted, of course, all the lights shut off at the end of the night so that they would preserve electricity. And it was just a specific manager that George didn't seem to like. So the manager would shut off all these lights, and even as he pulled out of the driveway, half the lights would be turned back on. He was actually getting in trouble with the owner. The owner would drive by in the middle of the night and say, "Why are all the lights on?" And he was like, "I shut them all off, I swear." He eventually had to get an employee to certify with him. They would do the full rounds at the end of the night, and the manager would say, "Do you see me flicking off this light switch?" And the employee would say, "Yes," and the lights would be off, and they'd go to the next room. "Do you see me flicking off this light switch?" "Yes," and the lights are off. Okay, so that was the only way he would not get in trouble for leaving lights on, was to have a second employee be his witness. That's how persistent George was. Now, one of the things that George would love to do too is you could be having a nice, enjoyable meal as you were enjoying that dinner. You might get a cold spot. You might get an eerie feeling. And every once in a while, you'd actually feel a hand on your shoulder for just a moment. Did I hurt that sunburn? I was trying. No. And you would suddenly turn around to look, of course, and there would be no one there. In the final few years, it would actually become a challenge. The owner would actually go up to tables every once in a while that were curious about the paranormal history of the building, and they would get the owner talking to them about it, and the owner would say, "I'll tell you what, if one of you has the guts to go up those main stairs to the second floor and stay there for 2 minutes, dinner's on me." No one ever won the bet. George actually cooperated. He would do everything he could. He'd give them the cold spots. He'd give them the eerie feelings. He'd give them the hands on the shoulder. Whatever it took. No one ever made it all the way up the stairs and stayed up there for 2 minutes. That's just how big of a reputation that George got at the King's Landing. So let's move just a little bit north of Kingsville now. We're kind of still in the Kingsville area, and we will go to Jack Minor's Bird Sanctuary. Now, the sanctuary would have started to come into operation in the late 1800s also. Jack Minor, of course, developed a tremendous reputation as a naturalist, particularly in the field of ornithology. He pioneered the concept of tagging birds so that we could start tracking their migratory patterns. He created that bird sanctuary. Numerous species altered their migratory patterns in order to settle there for a period of time during their migration, knowing they would get the utmost of care. And it took him years to set up that sort of bond with the various migratory birds in the area. He, of course, eventually built his home on the actual property. That home is now designated as a historical site. One of its most notable features is the conservatory. It's got a nice glass domed roof that affords you an excellent view of the duck pond and the sanctuary in general. And Minor himself loved entertaining people in the conservatory. And he was a notorious cigar smoker. He always had some of the best cigars you could get in the area. This would, again, been during late 1800s, early 1900s, so he probably wasn't getting the Cubans yet, but he was getting the good stuff. And he would oftentimes have friends over who enjoyed cigars too, and they would enjoy a nice puff in the evening in the conservatory watching the view outside at the same time. Now, of course, I'm sharing this with you because as we fast forward a century or so, this is, as I said, now a historically designated site, which means it has a team of caretakers. There are, of course, people actually running the sanctuary itself, taking care of the birds that land there, making sure they're well fed. They will even receive medical attention. So some of these are trained vets, but others are just maintenance engineers. And several of them have told the story of how at night, when they're doing kind of their last checks, now you can actually take tours through the homestead, but those tours end at around 5 p.m., if I remember correctly. And so they'll do a little walk through at around 6 or 7, just on the perimeter. And there's been any number of occasions when they're far enough away that they actually see a couple of figures in that conservatory. And they go, oh, somebody's staying inside the building after close. They just assume it's a person that was supposed to leave after a tour, but maybe hid somehow and is trying to have a tour of their own, shall we say. So they immediately start running towards the structure to get these people kicked out, of course. And as they get closer, suddenly the figures aren't there anymore. They don't see them in the window. Now, that doesn't mean that they've faded out of existence. They're not even assuming that yet. They still think these are trespassers, and that maybe they just saw the maintenance team running towards them and ran out of the room. So they will do a full check of the building. They'll check every nook and cranny. Everything is locked up. No signs of forced entry. There was no one actually in the building when they saw those figures in the conservatory. However, when they go into the conservatory, they can smell cigar smoke. So now let's move a little bit further north. Let's finally get into Windsor itself. Let's go into the Walkerville region, named, of course, after Hiram Walker himself, the maker of Canadian Club whiskey. What I firmly believe the best whiskey around, not just because of my strong allegiance to locally made, but also I have just drank a lot of the stuff and always enjoyed it quite a bit. Usually with Coke, just a little bit. It's a strong mix. It's usually a lot more rye than Coke, but there is just a little bit of Coke in there. Hiram Walker, of course, had a number of other interesting achievements in his career, and he really did build up that area, which is why we now name the area Walkerville. It's sort of in tribute to him. And, of course, one of the biggest buildings in that region is Willestead Manor, named after Hiram Walker's first son. The building itself is now a public building, also with historical designation. A lot of these buildings that are said to be haunted oftentimes are being historically preserved at the same time. So a lot of public events go on there, a lot of weddings and things of that nature. And so an interesting thing started happening just a few years back. There seems to be a presence of some sort lurking in the basement of the building that doesn't seem to like authority. Doesn't get along with authority figures at all. So there was a catering company that had signed an exclusive deal with the manor, and they were catering all these events. And there were certain events that would get extra busy, and there was a spare trolley in a special storage room in the basement that they would sometimes pull out for when they were dealing with a lot of heavy foot traffic. And they'd put, plates and silverware or even food on the trolley and be able to transport it quickly and efficiently to different locations throughout the building. Now, whenever that trolley was needed, for many years, they would send down an employee of the catering company to get it. Because usually the manager wanted to be up on the main floor, keeping an eye on things. But one night, everyone on the staff seemed to be just too busy to go get this trolley, and it was desperately needed. So the manager that was on duty that night went downstairs to this special storage room. And now normally it takes 4 or 5 minutes tops to retrieve this trolley. Well, the manager's there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, nearly 20 minutes. The other employees are starting to get concerned. When at last the manager emerges, she's looking very frazzled, even legitimately disheveled. Something terrible has happened to her while she was down there. She doesn't say anything except, "That is it! I am not working here again!" And she charges out the front door and never comes back. She quits on the spot. Well, obviously, upper management of the catering company hauls her in to ask her what's going on. And she has been so upset by whatever was done to her in that basement that night that she will not tell them what happened. They try to bargain with her. They say, "Well, we'd still like you in the company. You're an excellent manager. we just won't send you to Williston anymore. And she was so upset by whatever occurred that she won't even work for the catering business anymore. She completely quits, does a huge pivot in her career, and gets in this completely different line of work. That's how terrifying it was. However, this catering company sends in a new manager. The new manager even hears a little bit about the prior manager's experience, but he's one of those people that doesn't really subscribe to the idea of the supernatural. He's not a believer, as they like to call them. So, again, though, most of the time he's sending the employee down to get that trolley when they need it. Because, again, he needs to be on the floor keeping an eye on things until, again, one fateful night, everybody's too busy. Well, he's not worried. He goes down himself to get the trolley. He's down there for a good 15, 20 minutes, too. When he does finally come back up, he's an absolute mess. And what does he yell? The exact same thing as the prior manager. That is it! I am never working here again! And he storms out, gets the same interview from upper management, and again is so disturbed by what happened to him that he will not even work in the catering business anymore. 2 managers in a row assaulted in some bizarre way by the spirit. We still don't know to this day what exactly was done to them in that basement on those nights. That's Williston Manor. But we're not going to leave Walkerville quite yet. There's another building there, also made famous by Hiram Walker, and that is the Canadian Club offices right along Riverside Drive. Sadly, the building has been closed to the public, but for a number of years, you could tour the offices. The offices are no longer in use, but they were historically preserved. And I always like telling the story of how Walker's nickname was the Little Cannon, because he was very short in stature. Don't be fooled by that statue you see on Riverside Drive. He looks very, very tall and towering. That's falsification. He was in the lower 5-foot range. So they called him the Little Cannon because he was small in stature, but still packed a wall up. He got what he wanted. He was a very persistent person. Now, you'd think he might be insulted by a nickname like that, but Walker leaned into it. He actually had a small cannon in his office that is still there to this day. Unfortunately, as I said, we're no longer allowed to tour the establishment, but it is still there. So the interesting, though, is when that office was still in use, it had a number of very valuable artistic artifacts, lots of very expensive paintings and such like, that were strewn about the place on display in various hallways. So they actually had a security guard that patrolled the place at night. Because of the value of the merchandise that was in there, he was actually allowed to carry a gun. He was given a special permit because the place could be broken into by some very violent people because the merchandise, as I said, was quite expensive. So he was strolling down the main hall one night, and as you know, Canadian Club had a lot of involvement in Prohibition too. So as he's strolling along, he looks to the end of the hallway, and he sees a gentleman just leaning against the wall in a 3-piece suit and an old-school fedora, looking like a classic rum runner. He has no idea how the guy got into the building. There's alarms rigged up everywhere that should have gone off at the opening of the window or a swinging of a door. And yet somehow, the rum runner is just at the end of that hallway, leaning against the wall, not even looking at the security guard. So the security guard calls out to him and says, "Can I help you, sir?" The rum runner doesn't seem to even hear him. He moves a little bit closer and says, "Sir, I need you to put your hands up where I can see them." He's immediately going into his protocols to ensure that he can apprehend this guy properly. And again, the rum runner doesn't even acknowledge his existence. Finally, he draws his gun and says, "Sir, if you don't put your hands up right now where I can see them, I will fire." Still ignored. So he actually rings off a single shot that he knows hit that rum runner, but it passes right through him without harming him. The rum runner finally turns and notices him. and fades before his eyes. That security guard, shortly thereafter, found a new job too. So now let's start heading west through Windsor. We're along Riverside Drive, and we're going into what they like to call historic Sandwich Town. Why is it called historic Sandwich Town? Because it is the oldest part of the city. Windsor grew from the rest of that area. It was a very busy port of call from the early 1800s onwards. Again, as I was talking about earlier, we were in an excellent strategic position along the Great Lakes. And so very quickly, all the boats stopped in their journeys through the Great Lakes at Sandwich Town. Named after, of course, the Earl of Sandwich, who would have been a very popular earl at the time. Not because we eat a lot of sandwiches in that region. Well, we do still eat quite a few sandwiches, but that's still not where the name came from. And again, as I was saying earlier, the older an area is, the more people die. So the more haunted it can be. And it certainly is the case with a number of buildings, both, as I said, residential and commercial. So another one that's half residential and half commercial is known as Cutterman's Bakery. It's run by Mary Ann Cutterman. And the upstairs is, of course, where she lives, and the downstairs is the baking area, and there's actually a nice dining room you can eat from, too. And this is another one of those buildings that's about, well, a little over 2 centuries old at this point. And so it's had many different owners over the years. Mary Ann is, of course, the most current. And Mary Ann likes to talk about the 3 sisters. These are the spirits of 3 sisters that she believes lived there about a century or so prior. She's done a little bit of research into the past, and there was one family that had 3 daughters. And she thinks the 3 sisters are still there looking over the place to this day. Does this bother Mary Ann? No. In fact, the spirits are not just benevolent, they're quite helpful. Mary Ann can remember any number of occasions where she'd be working in the bakery, and of course she'd lay out all her ingredients before she started. She'd get about halfway through the mixing process and suddenly go, "Oh, I forgot to grab a certain item." And she's expecting to have to turn and cross to the other end of the room to go get it. And suddenly it's down in front of her on the table. There's been a few times even when she had put something in the oven and forgotten about it. So she's convinced, of course, that it's burnt to a crisp. She runs back into the kitchen a considerable amount of time later, expecting the room to be full of smoke. And sure enough, whatever was in that oven is sitting on the table, cooling. She did have her daughters living with her for quite a while, so sometimes she thought it was one of her daughters. She'd check with them. "I was upstairs, Mom. I didn't even come downstairs." So somehow that pie got out of the oven all on its own. She's convinced again that it was one of those 3 sisters. When you think about it, it's a pretty convenient staffing arrangement. We'll move a little bit further west. We'll go to the Duff Bobby House. The Duff Bobby House is named after the 2 most prominent families that lived there. The Duff family, of course, and then eventually the Bobby family. Now, don't be tricked. When you look at the placard in front of the building, it appears to say Duff Baby, but the Bobby family were French, so you've got to say it with that hoity-toity French accent, which is Bobby. I can say it properly because I actually am bilingual. I can do the rest of the performance in French if you'd like. No? No? Okay. You want to just sit around and not understand anything I'm saying for the next little while? I won't do that. Oh, regarde, toi. OK. Juste pour toi. On va faire le reste du spectacle en français. Okay. No. So,
Keep it going for funding. Keep it going.
Didn't even think of that. There you go. Instead, a whole French wing. A lot of the caretakers there, again, they had a full-time team of caretakers, just like over at Jack Miners, because, again, it had historical designation. A lot of the caretakers like to talk about the ghost dog. Believe it or not, they have heard a dog on the premises or even around the premises when there is never a dog to be found. Any number of people have offices in this building now. This oftentimes is what happens with a building with historical designation. People rent out offices in it. And there's nice hardwood floors in the Duff Bobby House, which means that you'll hear the clack, clack, clack that the claws of dogs make. So you'll actually hear the clack, clack, clack coming down the hallway Walking into your office, you'll hear a panting noise, sometimes even a low growl, but there's absolutely nothing there. The dog is very protective of the building at night. A lot of these caretakers do have to come in after hours sometimes to do certain operations that if they did during the day, the public would be in the way of. And oftentimes, as they open the door, they'll suddenly start hearing a very fierce barking, almost as if something's coming at them to defend the building. But the ghost dog appears to know the voices of all the caretakers, so they literally have to just call out, "It's just me, I'm working late!" And the dog settles down, leaves them alone. Let's move just a little bit more west to what I like to call the most haunted building in all of Windsor, Essex. Anybody want to try to guess which building that is? The Pelee Club. It's in Windsor. Well, I guess, yeah, Pelee is still part of that region. You're right. Apparently, there's some stories for the Pelee Club for me after this that I'm going to have to listen to.
Stay in Windsor?
Sandwich Town. We're still in Sandwich Town. What do you think?
Mackenzie Hall.
You got it. A round of applause.
We was built out of stone from here.
Yes, that's right. You know your history. Do you want to just do the rest for me? I'll end it. Okay. Al Français, no less. Yes. Mackenzie Hall, of course, was originally built to be a prison, courthouse, and place of execution all rolled into one. During colonial times, the law moved very swiftly. Many innocent men were sent to their deaths. And punishments for crimes could be very, very harsh. Public hangings. The building is rich in blood. Those kind of violent deaths oftentimes leave residual effects. One of my favorite ghosts in there, it also is part of one of my favorite ghost stories in the building. Again, I could have filled this entire hour with just Mackenzie Hall stories. I'll just give you my favorite for now. And that is, it involves a ghost that I've put a lot of thought into the name of this ghost. I call him the Dragging Ghost. Take a guess what he does. He drags things, yes. He's a poltergeist. Apparently not a very strong one, because he can just move things a little bit along the surface. Can't quite lift them. But he drags them along, and several people, including myself, have actually had experiences with the Dragging Ghost. But my absolute favorite concerns an employee that was working there, again, like a lot of these other buildings, like, say, Williston Manor, which I was talking about earlier. Mackenzie Hall has a lot of public events in it, a lot of weddings, they even do theater productions in there. One of the people that performs in those shows is extremely talented and very attractive. And I think you can figure out who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Joey?
No, not Joey. Not Joey. Joey hires me to be in his shows.
Jackie.
There you go. Jackie's actually incredible. You're right. I've had Jackie has a huge crush on me. I just haven't told her yet. I'll eventually let her know. Actually, sadly, neither Joey nor Jackie are there anymore. Mm-hmm. But did you ever hear Joey's story about the Dragon Ghost? Yeah.
I believe I did.
Oh, okay.
We used to have an office in there.
Did you? Yeah. Okay. Joey. Well, you know how the upstairs gallery looks, right?
Yep.
I'll explain it for everybody. The upstairs gallery is oftentimes where he would do his productions. Mm-hmm. It's almost 2 stories tall, and it's a huge area. It's almost as big as the quarry, and it has different types of events going on there. Sometimes banquets, and sometimes, as I said, theatrical performances. So you have to adjust the lights and the ceiling accordingly. If it's a theatrical production, you're kind of concentrating them all on one end of the room. If it's just a straight banquet, then they're pointing straight down. You got to get out this special A-frame ladder that's literally 2 stories tall. And Joey knew that the lights needed to be adjusted, and he was waiting till the end of the day when everybody was out. It would just be easier to do it then. And so now he's alone in the building, and has been for quite some while. It's probably getting close to midnight. He sets up the A-frame ladder, and he starts adjusting these lights, and then he hears an alarm go off. So he, of course, has to go down to investigate. Now, the alarm system they had at the time was very, very oversensitive. Anything could set it off. Oftentimes, on a windy night, branches that were too close to the window would set off the motion detectors and get the alarm going. So Joey's pretty sure it's a false alarm, but he goes to the designated area that's indicating movement, looks around, no signs of entry. So now he's got to go back up to the main foyer, which is on the first floor, and that gallery is just above him. There's a set of stairs that leads up to it. And he's there on the office phone calling into the alarm company. He's got a special passcode that he can give them. And he lets them know it's a false alarm. Now, here's the interesting part. As all of this is going on, as I already specified, the gallery is just above him with a set of stairs leading up to it. He's talking to the security company on the phone, and he can hear the A-frame ladder dragging across the floor. You're upset with what I just did to the microphone, aren't you? Okay, good.
Not my microphone.
Oh, good. Because I'm going to do it 2 or 3 more times. He continues talking to him. He knows he's completely alone in this building. The one part of the building where there could have been someone entering, he's just investigated, and he knows there was no one there.
Rob owes us $80.
And again...
On the record.
And again, you can hear that ladder dragging across the floor, stopping for maybe 30, 45 seconds, and then suddenly dragging again. He finally gets done the security call, hangs up with them. You can still hear that ladder dragging. And he thinks to himself, you know what? Those damn lights can wait till the morning. He just gets out through that front door, locks the door behind him, and rearms the alarm system. Apparently, he looked through those front doors because there's a nice glass pane that he can see through. He looked through those glass doors one last time as he was leaving, and he saw the ladder sliding down the stairs. Still didn't go back to look. Let's start heading south. We're just about wrapped up here, so let's give you 1 or 2 more stories. Of course, if we're heading south towards Amherstburg, we got to take at least a brief stop at that famous road. Come on, everybody, we know it. Texas Road. I'll give you just a nice, quick Texas Road. There are, of course, hundreds of them. Many of them are more like old legends than actual ghost accounts. There's a difference between an old legend and a ghost account. A ghost account is someone who I've generally gathered that story from. Like I said, we just talked about Joey. I got that story directly from Joey. Ghost legends are more just word of mouth. It's even almost like the typewriter game, or the telephone game, rather, not the typewriter game. The telephone game where it gets distorted more and more and more as it passes on, and you never actually meet the people that it happened to. You just hear about it. If you're familiar with the famous legend of the Nez Rouge, for instance, which was this mystical dwarf that is said to wander through Detroit and Sandwich Town. Many people have claimed to have seen him over the years, but we never meet the people that say they saw the Nez Rouge. It's just a legend that's sort of been born out of the area. It's a very popular legend. There is a festival of the Nez Rouge now in Detroit every year because he is supposed to be a potent of doom. So they have this festival to try to drive the Nez Rouge off for 1 more year. So anyway, we get on to Texas Road, and I will give you an actual ghost account that I got from the person directly. She actually grew up on Texas Road for a period of time. She lived in a house on Texas Road. She's asked that we withhold her name, so we'll just simply refer to her as Kylie. Kylie had this very eccentric neighbor who she just simply called Mrs. Ferguson. She would eventually find out that Mrs. Ferguson had a husband who had passed, and since the loss of her husband, something had happened to her. She changed into this much more sort of befuddled person, if we will. And the one thing she was she was greatly distrustful of children. If you walked in front of Mrs. Ferguson's house, she would come traipsing out in a pair of galoshes and some old nightgown that she was wearing that day. And she'd go all the way to the edge of her driveway. She'd just stare at you balefully as you walked by until you were past her property. And then she'd stomp back into her house. And if you had to walk by her place on the way back, what would happen? Mrs. Ferguson would always stop you and come stomping out in her galoshes again, stare at you from the edge of her property until you were past it. even Kylie, who was her neighbor, would get that sort of treatment from her. So eventually one day, Kylie's walking past Mrs. Ferguson's house and expecting her to come out. And she doesn't. So she goes into the house and she says, "Hey, Dad, is Mrs. Ferguson okay? I just walked by and she didn't come out." Dad explains that Mrs. Ferguson has gone to the hospital. She's not feeling well. And so Kylie's, feeling bad for Mrs. Ferguson. But she forgets about it for a while. And a couple weeks go by. And finally Mrs. Ferguson makes her triumphant return. But this time she's in this actual beautiful white gown. It's so pure in its ivory hue that it almost seems to glow. But she still traipses out to that lot driveway and just stares balefully at Kylie as she walks past. Kylie goes into the house. Her dad just happens to be sitting in the living room again, reading the newspaper. And she says, "Hey, I guess Mrs. Ferguson is all right."
Nope.
Exactly. Dad says, "What are you talking about?" She says, "I just saw her outside." Dad actually drops the newspaper. Kylie says, "What's wrong?" His dad says, "Mrs. Ferguson died last week." So that is an actual account from Texas Road. There's many stories of headless horsemen and all kinds of other great fun stuff like that, but every once in a while you get a legitimate paranormal experience from the road too, which does make me wonder if maybe there is a ring of truth to all the terror we hear about on Texas Road. Let's go just into Amherstburg nice and quick, and we'll finish up our tour of the city and county with Park House Museum. This would be another building with historical designation. It was built in the late 1800s by the Park family. That's why it gets its name. It would have originally been situated closer to Detroit, but it was eventually moved into Amherstburg, where it was restored. And you can do, again, public tours of the building to see what people used to live like in that time. For quite a few years, the curator was a woman by the name of Valerie Buckey. And Valerie tells this great story of how people will go up on the second floor and they'll see this woman who they think must be an employee because she's dressed in period costume. So they talk to her for several long minutes, and she seems to have a great knowledge of the colonial period. And they're like, "Wow, you've been really helpful, thanks." And they continue just walking through the building. They don't usually do guided tours. It's just, you can just walk through the building and look at different exhibits and such like. And Valerie will be downstairs at the main door, sitting at the head table in the foyer. And the visitor will come back down, or the visitors will come back down. Sometimes it's multiple people talking to the woman. And they go, "Hey, you've got a really helpful employee up there. Thanks for hiring. You did a good job training her." And Valerie will go, "I don't have an employee upstairs right now." So yeah, this woman looks so real and solid that they actually think it's a person rather than a spirit. They'll actually purposely go back up and investigate. There's no sign of anyone there anymore. It's been noted, and this has happened several times now, so Valerie's assuming that it happened even more often, but that people didn't come downstairs to talk to her about it. The woman is always wearing black, and from the description in general that's been given of her, she believes it's Mrs. Park herself who lost her child at a very young age. And Mrs. Park is always seen in this one specific room, which would have been the room of that child. So they believe that she still lingers there mourning the loss of that child. But that's one of my favorite stories of all, just because she is mistaken for an actual human being. Now, in my researches of Pelee Island, and I have a feeling that I'm going to get a bunch more information in just a couple of minutes, the only thing I found is more of an old legend. It doesn't have the most politically correct of titles.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the Pelee Island Indian Maiden is what I've learned about.
I've been myth-busting this for a few years.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, again, it's an old legend.
Give it up.
It's an old legend. So, and I have to agree with you. I kind of saw some inconsistencies there too. She was a part of a tribe that was living here on the island. Eventually, some settlers came along and negotiated coexisting with them on the island. And she fell in love with one of the colonists. And they apparently had a torrid affair of some sort. But then he had to go back to the mainland. but he promised he would come back for her shortly. And she waited an extensive period of time, and he never seemed to show up. And she got so depressed that she found a cliff of some sort. This is the part that I agree. I'm like, what's going on here? Where is there a cliff on Pelee Island? Right? The best she could do was fling. Yeah, but she flung to her death. I'm pretty sure you could really, really jump hard off of that, and you're not gonna get too badly hurt. Is that how you've tried to debunk it?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just natural instinct.
Okay. Yeah. So she committed suicide, but by flinging herself off a cliff.
Yeah, with much gnashing of teeth and pulling of
Yes, that's right. I read that too. Apparently, maybe we just both looked at the same webpage. But and now people do claim on certain occasions to see occasionally a woman dressed in old First Nations garb wandering along the shorelines, and you'll look and you'll notice her, and then maybe you look away for a second, you look back and she's gone, or sometimes they say she fades away before your very eyes. But apparently she's been sighted by any numerous people. But again, this is where we go more into a ghost legend, because I have yet to talk to anybody that's seen this mythical.
much like the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Usually after the pub that they see.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, yes. Good point. And that might explain why so many Scottish people see the Loch Ness Monster. Anyway, so I tried to get at least one story about the island, but I hope you enjoyed our sort of magical mystery tour of Windsor, Essex.
Very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good night. I will just get out of these black robes, because this is just the worst weather to be in black robes for.
Yes.
But yeah, if you have some stuff for me, I'll be back out in a couple of minutes.
Talk to that woman.
All right, keep your hands going for Rob Tymec! Not Tymec. Tymec. Yeah. Keep your hands going for Pamela. Melissa, captain and crew, we came here safe with some air conditioning.
Nice.
That is a blaze of story. I want to thank everyone who came out, everyone who's tuned in. There's a pile of people who are in Facebook right now. So thank you for joining us on the island. This was awesome. This was exciting. This is the 4th stop on our tour. We have 1 stop left, and then we conclude our first Essex region tour. Next year, we are going to cover more of Ontario, and then 2028, we are going across the country.